We will start with the pack itself. This is a granite gear. It is, in my opinion, one of the best deals out there for a pack of this general type. It's extremely light, weighs about 2 pounds. You'll see that I've got 2 water bottles. We're going to talk about water storage along with this at the same time. You need to carry water with you, obviously, because you need to have something to drink. There's a lot of different strategies that people use. I used to like the bladders, and then I had some bad problems with them. So I don't use those anymore. What I've gone to is, believe it or not, a 1-liter soda bottle. And then I bring a couple of the small Walmart-style drinking water bottles. These, of course, are filled with drinkable water when I start. But we'll talk about what we do about that on the trail in a moment, because, of course, you consume this. Now, I have 1 set of those in each side. So I can carry, using this setup, 3 liters without any problems. If I want to carry more, I can either put a bladder in the top, or the other alternative, and it is a perfectly viable choice, by the way, is to put 2 1-liter bottles in there instead of the half-liter. It will hold 2 on each side. So, but the reason for that will become clear. The next thing is a item that many people are going to choose not to carry. You can see it down here. It's a thing that says ACR. That's a personal locator beacon. That's an old one that I happen to have from my time when I owned boats. And the newer ones are much lighter. Let me say this. If you are hiking by yourself, you might want to consider whether or not your life is worth a couple $100. The little spot devices sound great. They're wonderful when they work. However, they don't work everywhere. These do. If you mash that button, it is because everything has gone completely to crap and you need someone to come get you. The only thing that is reasonably guaranteed that will do this is one of these PLBs. This one is quite, like I said, quite heavy. The new ones will take about half that weight off. So if you're a gram weenie, that's something that you definitely want to consider. You'll also notice there's a whistle on the pack. The whistle is not actually in case of rape. I don't think anybody would want to do that to me, although you never know. You know, these days, there's some kind of strange people out there. No, actually, the whistle is there because if you encounter dangerous wildlife, frequently making noise is plenty enough for them to go away. Or if you have some reason to want to call attention to yourself, you just fell off a cliff and you hear somebody hiking above you, that is a much better tool for doing that than your screaming. And your screaming will work in a pinch. In the pouch, we have a multi-tool on one side. The other side, I normally keep part of my day's ration in a plastic bag. No food ever touches this pack directly, and it's very important that it doesn't, because I frequently bring it inside the tent with me. By the way, the tent itself is an REI Quarter Dome 2, which is technically a 2-person tent. I am sitting on the sleeping pad, which you can see here. That is the pad that I use when I hike. And the pad's approximately centered. So you can see that while this technically will fit 2 people, you better like each other a lot. I consider this a 1-person tent. Your mileage on that may vary. The penalty for carrying this as opposed to a Quarter Dome 1 is about half a pound, and I think it's worth it. So the next 2 items are these green sacks in the front. This one contains all of my clothing, believe it or not. And this next one over here contains an emergency med kit that I made up myself. The most important things in there are basic analgesics like aspirin or Motrin if you prefer, and some moleskin. Folks, if you ever get a blister and you're 20 miles from anything useful, you will really wish you had that with you. Everything else is optional. I do, however, have a self-adhesive ACE bandage in there because immobilizing things sometimes is necessary. The back compartment is actually the brain bag that goes on top of the pack. These items do not go inside there. The PLB does, and a bunch of the things that I'm going to talk about next. Next is 2 things that you need to bring. We all know that for guys and in the woods for girls, you can just kind of, let it go, right? Number 2 is a different situation. So, we need a trowel to dig a cat hole, and we need some toilet paper. The basic process here is that you dig the cat hole, you do your business in the cat hole, and then you make sure that it is buried. Thus the name cat hole, because that's what a cat does. There is one trick that I don't see discussed in forums and in videos and such, and that is, if you want to be successful in doing this the first time and you've never done it before, the hint I will give you is to pull your pants at your knees, both from the top and bottom. This makes it almost impossible to do a number 2 on your clothes. You'll thank me later. Yeah. Okay. The next items are both hand sanitizer and some 100% DEET. Now, this you should not ever need. Why? Because you're going to hike in permethrin-treated long pants and a very thin nylon long shirt. Why are you going to do this? Because it will keep ticks and other biting insects away from you, and therefore you will not need the DEET. If you run into something that ignores permethrin, you have a backup. It weighs almost nothing, and it's worth having with you. The hand sanitizer, by the way, is used in place of soap. The reason you don't use soap is because then you must use water. Water is life. You drink water, and you do not foul water supplies that you find in the wild by washing in them. As a result, we use hand sanitizer. No, it's not perfect. However, it's the best compromise. Next item, a headlamp. $10 at Walmart. Buy one, keep it with you. Hint to the wise, take one of the 3 AAA batteries out and put it in your electronics package. The first time you push the switch in your pack and find yourself with a dead headlamp, you will understand why that's very important. That is, of course, to be fixed in the evening, but as you can see right now, it does nothing because one of the batteries is missing. That's intentional. All right, behind it, we have a mesh bag. It must be a mesh bag because it has to drain. In the mesh bag is our water filtration system. I use 2 different water filtration technologies at once. The first one is the Sawyer mini filter. And you can get these in 2 different sizes. I bought the slightly larger one because it's faster. They both are just as effective as the other, and it comes with a bag. The idea is you fill the bag with the foul water. You make sure that none of it gets into your clean bottle. You then screw that onto the back of the filter and squeeze. If for some reason you cannot squeeze because your bag has ruptured, this is why you use 1 liter and half-liter bottles. The threads will screw into the back of that filter. There's also a hose in there, so if you have something that can take a hose, you can put that in there. Basically, you want some redundancy in ways to get water into the filter. It does work by gravity, it just takes quite a bit longer. So for speed, you want to squeeze, but you don't need to. Now, that is a 90% answer to the problem of what do I do with regards to water filtration. The other 10% of the answer is the 2 little bottles that you see in the back. These are Aquamira drops. This is the same stuff, chlorine dioxide, that goes into municipal drinking water. Why do we bring that? Because there are some things that will go through filters, viruses in particular. It is not very likely that backcountry water sources are going to have those kinds of pathogens in them, but I will guarantee you this. If you have a waterborne problem, you are going to be absolutely stinking miserable. And so anything you can do to avoid it is well worth the trouble. That costs very little and weighs basically nothing. My next piece of kit, sorry about the strap there, folks, is my luxuries. What are luxuries? In this case, communications gear, a upload tool, a small power bank, and the cords necessary to charge both my phone and my Garmin watch, along with, the 3rd battery for the headlamp. Gee, I wonder why it's in there. Yeah, right. I already told you that. All right, next up is obviously a sleeping bag. We then have a tripod. This you don't really need to bring unless you're a camera buff, but as you can see, I'm shooting video, so I am. The nice thing about this kind of tripod is that it will grip around almost anything. So if you want to hook it onto a tree, a railing, a whatever, screw it onto your camera to take a shot that otherwise needs stabilization, you now have a way to do that. Towards the bottom, we have clothing. And by the way, it is the middle of May right now, and you say, what do I need extra clothing for? Well, you need it for a couple of reasons. First off, you don't know how cold it's going to get overnight. Secondly, there is this thing called rain. The item on the right is a very light fleece double-shelled jacket. It will keep you warm as long as you are moving down to extremely cold temperatures. But it will not do you a damn bit of good if you get soaking wet. And that is what the jacket on the left is for. The thing in the back is actually a pair of thermal underwear, which is, since I have room for it, I bring it. If I don't have it, and it's in the summer, I don't. However, those are nice at night if it gets cold. You put them on while you're in your sleeping bag. All right. And then the next item on the far end there are 2 emergency survival items. And by the way, there's another one in the med kit. And that is because I do not normally bring a cooking appliance. And I'll explain why when I go through my food. There are always to be 2 ways of making fire with you whenever you are in the backcountry. I do not care who you are, or what you're doing, or why you're there. You always have 2 ways to do it. In this case, one of them is a magnesium bar, which along with my knife will make a fire. And the paracord is in the event that I need to tie something up or fix a piece of equipment, lash something to something else. And in a real dire emergency, I could probably climb up a crag with it if it was absolutely necessary. So if I've got some shot at self-rescue if it becomes a major factor. All right, so the other, by the way, guess where the other piece of fire-making equipment is? That would be over here in the med bag. Why? Because that's where it belongs, and that is a butane lighter. All right, so why do we not have any kind of cooking appliances in my kit here? Because I don't use them. Why don't I use them? Because I eat low carb, high fat. And we're going to get to food here when I get outside and can show you the contents of my food storage. By the way, all of this fits easily in that with plenty of room to spare. So if you're wondering whether or not this is really all that hard to do, it's not. And this entire conflagration here, including the shelter that I am sitting in, weighs approximately 18 pounds. So not too bad. And that is, of course, without the food and the water. The food and water are extra because they are consumables. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, so as promised, let's talk about food storage and food. I had to come outside the tent here. And what we have here is a Bear Boxer Model 100 can. This is actually a relatively simple device. I'm not going to close it completely until we're done, and I'll show you how it works. This is very similar to the Garcia Bear canister, however it is smaller. It will hold, they say, approximately 3 days worth of food for one person. If you are a low carb, high fat person like me, you can get 5 days worth of food in this thing. Why? Because fats have more energy in them per gram of mass than do carbohydrates or protein, and therefore if you are a high fat, low carb, moderate protein kind of person, you manage to get more in less weight and less space. This is a good thing. All right, so what do we have in here? We have nuts, and this is approximately 1 day's worth of nut rations. That plus 2 bags of Duke's sausages is almost perfectly isocaloric at about 3,000 calories, believe it or not. Yes, you will, if you try to eat that every day when you are not hiking 10 or 15 miles a day, you are going to gain weight like nobody's business. I can get, like I said, about 5 days worth of provisions in this bag, in this can, if I'm careful. The trick with the Dukes is there's a lot of air in the bags, which of course takes up space. The problem with opening the bags is that they do not have preservatives in them, and therefore you now have a spoilage problem. So my gimmick with this is the first day's provisions get refrigerated the night before I go, and in the morning I go ahead and I blow the air out of the bags and then repack. This is a cheat, however it allows me to get 4 to 5 days worth of provisions in one of these cans, whereas otherwise I would have to come up with something other than those sausages, and I love those damn things to death. I could pack 5 days worth of nuts into there with, I could probably put 7 days worth of nuts in there, but I would get bored out of my skull eating nothing but nuts. Hard cheeses and stuff are fine too. Just watch the calorie content. You want to aim in the anywhere in the neighborhood of 170 to 190 calories per ounce. If you get much below that into the 120, 130 area, you start to run into space problems. All right, so that's part of it. The other thing is, you'll notice that thing sticking up is my toothbrush. Toothbrush and toothpaste, floss. Floss doesn't have to go in there, but toothbrush, toothpaste do. Reason being, you do not want anything that smells like food ever, unprotected in your pack or in your tent. And especially not in your tent. This thing here, lid goes on. You take your multi-tool, you place it in the slot, you rotate and it pops up and you're done. Lock all three of them, obviously. You only need to lock one if it's in your pack, because all you really care about is the lid falling off. But when you go to put it out in the evening, you lock all three of those. You place it at the base of a tree a couple 100 feet from your camp. If you anticipate that it might rain or otherwise get wet, turn it upside down, because there is no seal on the lid, obviously, and everything will be just fine. Now, everyone thinks these are just bear deterrents. They're not. There's nothing worse than having a bunch of rodents tear into your food. And by the way, many of them are smart enough to climb down a rope that you use to hang it from a tree, squirrels and mice and such, and get into it that way. If you use one of these, you will never ever wake up in the morning to find that all of your provisions have been bitten into. Normally when that happens with rodents, by the way, they don't eat them, they just damage them, which is possibly worse, because then you're not going to want to eat them, and yet you have food. I don't know whether it's actually worse to lose all your food or to have some that you don't want to eat because you don't know what was biting into it and you're reasonably sure it wasn't human. By the way, absolutely nothing goes to waste in nature. This little bad boy had some kind of an accident, probably got stepped on by a hiker earlier this morning, and as you can see, the ants are making very, very short work out of him. My guess is that by evening, there's not going to be anything here that's recognizable. You know, the bear thing in the camp is bad enough, but that, I think, might even be worse. The other thing about food or anything that is unnatural smelling does not smell like stinky human. Stinky human will not attract animals. They don't like stinky human. However, perfumes, deodorants, anything like that never goes in the tent. It is not just large animals, it is also small, nasty animals. Raccoon will ruin your night just as certainly as will a bear. So in terms of things you do not want in your camp, it is anything of that general type, and the way you avoid that problem is one of these little guys. This will fit in virtually any decent sized pack. It does carry a couple of pounds of mass. Okay, I think it's a pound 9 ounces or something like that, or 10 ounces. So there is a weight penalty to have the protection, but being able to go essentially anywhere, whether there's a ranger that is going to be checking and says, you know, hey, you have to have those things, or whether you just don't want your food tampered with, I think it's worth it. And I have, since I've started using them, I haven't had any problems. And I just think it's fantastic. Now, the bigger Garcia cans, I have one of those too, folks. If you've got multiple people in your party that you are carrying for, then they make some sense. If you're going to be out more than 5 days, or if you absolutely insist on bringing, like, you know, gourmet carbohydrate-based foods, then maybe they make some sense. But I got to tell you, they are a pain in the ass to carry, and so are the bear vaults. So just look at the sizes. Those other solutions, they certainly work, but I don't think there's anything better on the market than this in terms of actually doing the job and yet not loading you up too much. All right, so there we are with the food side of things, and with that, I will bid you adieu.